Hello, in this video we're going to be making this super cute slipper sock. It's extremely stretchy using North Shore Prints by Cascade Yarn. The color, oops, I hope it's not upside down. I forget the actual color name, it's not right on here, but there's the number and the lot. Here's the rest of the information about the yarn. Now, I do suggest getting 2 skeins of this. This one sock mate used a little over half of one, so you're going to need 2 unless you've got really tiny feet. Then 1 might work, might be enough for you. Now, I do have a pattern that's really similar to this one out. The ribbing's a little different. The big difference in this one though is my cast on that one was, I believe it was a cuff down sock. This one is a toe up, and as you can see, the only way you can tell my cast on is by a collar change right there. I do use a Kitchener cast on. It's not a technique unique to me. I've seen a couple other people use it. I know Scarlet Royal uses it a lot, and I've seen somebody else use it. I can't remember the name of her channel. I don't know who invented or created this technique, but it's very nice. I like it. For those who are very intimidated by knitting needles, this is a good cast on to do. Now let's talk about the loom. We are using this 60 peg 1/4 gauge sock loom. It's like an adult large sock loom from Cindywood, and it will make socks for if you have very wide feet or for a men's size sock. Now this one, I did the ribbing on it, so it's very stretchy. So you can use this, see how far it stretches out. It is very stretchy. So this is kind of like a one size fits most for adults, as a slipper style anyway. I do have this loom marked, so let's go ahead and talk about that for a moment. Got that one messed up. I was at Big Lots the other day and seen these. They were marked down to 40 cents. So that's the only reason I'm using these bracelet rubber bands instead of like the $1 pack of the hair rubber bands you can get from the Dollar Tree. These have 300 in them, and they're very brightly colored, so it's easy for me to tell my stitches apart. And how I'm marking these is I'm taking the rubber bands, I skip 2, and then I put the rubber band over 3 pegs at once, skip 2 over 3, skip 2 over 3. So 1/2 the loom I do in one color, the other half I'm doing in a second color. You can do the whole loom in one color, or you can just mark 1/2 the loom if you want. But the reason I did that is because this side is the front of the sock. The bottom of the sock you don't have the design on, but the back of the cuff you do. So that way when I get up to my top, up to my cuff, I can start doing the design on this back half. And let's go ahead and get started. Okay, now I am not, sometimes with socks, if it's a slower striping yarn, I will actually pull out yarn so that I get them to stripe exactly. With this one, I'm not concerned with that. There's a lot of color change in it, so just going with it as is will be fine. Now this Kitchener cast on that we are doing, what I'm going to do is, we don't need a real long tail, I'm just anchoring it. And what you do is, I'm coming up in between both these. This is my front side. And you go around one, you go around the other, and you're going to do this back and forth, going around the front of the peg. So you're going to go behind the previously wrapped, around the front of the next one. And at first it's a little difficult because you got to kind of push it with your hands past, but you want to make sure you're wrapping each peg the exact same way. And you're going to do this all the way to the other side. And basically when you get to a certain point on your sock, you'll just like tighten this up, which of course I'll go over that when it gets to that. So go ahead and wrap this just like I'm doing the front. Even when you get to this side down here, you're still going to be pulling the yarn in the same direction across the pegs. Okay, this is what it looks like when I'm all the way done. That last peg, and see, it's not wrapped around it, it's just laying over the front of it. Now for this very first row, and this first row only, just one time around, I am going to do a true knit stitch to every single one of these pegs. That's just going to lock this cast on in. Now I had done a sample one before where I used a U-stitch, which is what we use for the rest of the body of this, and I had a horrible time tightening up the Kitchener cast on. Now using the true knit stitch, this first row, it's going to be a little tighter than the others, but it's not a huge difference, so I don't find it anything that's so bothersome that you want to switch and use something else. Alright, now if you are unfamiliar with how to do the true knit stitch, what we're going to do is, the yarn is coming behind this and it's going in this direction, so this is how we're just going to work it. This right here will be our very last peg that we do. Now if you are purling, what you do is you take and you pull the yarn up through the bottom and put that new loop on. That is a purl stitch. For a knit stitch, you're going to pull the yarn down, take it off, and put that new stitch on. Now you do need to be careful with this cast on, finishing up this cast on, because this doesn't want to stay on there. So I found doing this to be the best way to get it to stay on until you get to where you're past your toe. So you're going to go all the way around the loom, take that off, which I will show you with this one right here. Okay, yeah, just watch what happens to the string when I pop this stitch off. So this is what I'm talking about. Like, that wants to immediately loosen up. Oh, it might help if I just get it on one peg. So you put the stitch on the peg and tighten it up. I'll do one more. You're pulling it down from the top, so the loop's coming out the bottom. You're taking the old stitch off, putting the new stitch on. Okay, do that all the way around until you get this last peg, then I'll show you how to do the toe. That first row is done. Now I cannot stress enough to watch your tension when you do this first row. You want to do this very loose so that the stitches are actually going down the way you want them to, because of how loose this is. If you pull on it at all, you end up with this initial, instead of seeing how it's looping down in between, it'll basically be like a line with these strings holding it on there. So you do want to watch for that. Now, the way we marked our loom, of course, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on one side, so we'll have 6 on the other side. So we know our loom's center part is from here to here, because that's in between the two, in between the collar change, right there and there. So we're going to do the toe. In the toe, we're going to do some decreases, and then we'll do some increases. Then we'll just start on the body. So what we're going to do is, for all of this, well, for most of this, we're actually going to be using the U-stitch. The U-stitch is very simple, it works up fast, and it's fairly tight. Now, the last peg I did was this one, and you can see the yarn, it's wanting to just go behind. So I'm just going to let it do what it wants to, because then the edges of this will lay a lot flatter, which I'll show you how this toe looks. Oh, let me get that. See, I don't have any holes or anything. And these are my yarn overs or whatever. But this is where I did my decrease and increase on both sides. Which, if you have a way you prefer to do this, you like the outcome better, that's fine. You can incorporate any heel or toe process that you want for this. This is just what I prefer to use. Okay, so the yarn's going behind that peg. It's going to go, we're just taking the yarn and wrapping it in front of the next peg. Now these first few rows, well, this first row here is still going to be very loose. But we're going to do this all the way to the first peg. I'm not going to make you sit through it, but I'll go ahead and work this down. Okay, we are at, well, the peg before our first peg is what I should have said. I've worked this one. Now I've got this peg. Now what I'm going to do is I lift the stitch off the peg, take the working yarn behind it and put that stitch back on. And now the yarn is just laying over the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to skip this one because the yarn is already over top of it and go to the next one. And we're going to continue using our U-stitch. Because right now we are working the bottom part of the toe. It'll be the bottom of the foot. Once we get to the top of the foot, we'll start using our ribbed stitch. But for now, we don't need to. Work this all the way down to the other side to this peg, which is the last peg, well, the peg before the last peg. It'll be peg 29 if you're counting pegs, because this is peg 30. Alright, we are at the peg before the last for the toe, and that is peg 29, so peg 30. What you're going to do is you're going to lift the stitch. Let me get my yarn in the right place. Lift the stitch, put your yarn behind, put that stitch back on, and then go all the way back to this peg right here. You'll lift this one, put the yarn behind, put the stitch back on, and go back to this side. You're repeating this back and forth each time using your U-stitch, and you're decreasing one each time, which is when you lift the stitch and put the working yarn behind it. I do have a lot of people ask why we do that as opposed to just wrap the peg and go. To show you how it turns out if you just wrap the peg and go for one side, that's what I will do. So I'm going to undo this. I'm just going to wrap the peg and go. For me, I seem to get more holes when I do that, but I've had people tell me that for them it works better to just wrap and go. So to continue doing this, you're just going back and forth, and this is 30 pegs. So what we want to do is basically we're going to do, let me see how many decreases I did. Okay, so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to do 8 decreases on both sides. What that means is we're going to go back and forth until we have 8 pegs on this side that have 2 loops on them, and 8 pegs on this side that have 2 loops on them. Then we'll do our increase. We have our 8 decreases on both sides. It kind of puts you in the middle of your second rubber band, and we've got that done on both sides. Now we're going to start doing our increases, but I do want to show you something real quick. Right here is where we start to do our increases. I don't start doing the rib stitch until we got a few rows down. I think I did 4. And then I started doing my rib stitch. Okay, so let's show you how to do your increase. what you're going to do is you're going to keep doing your U-stitch until you get down. Once we are to that first doubled peg, what you're going to do is take both those loops over that one loop, and you're just going to automatically start going back the other direction. And you're going to do this every time you come to a double loop. You're going to take both over the top and then turn around and go back the other direction and take both over the top. You're going to want to do 4 rows. Well, easy way to remember it, get past this first set of rubber bands, then we'll start doing our rib stitch. Okay, I increased, is what it's called when we pick up the 2, until I had 5 left on each side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It actually put it one past these rubber bands right here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, one past those rubber bands right there. Now we are going to start doing, following the pegs and doing the stitches as we do the rest of the increase. Now the way the stitches go, the unmarked pegs are U-stitches, the marked pegs are purl stitches. I kind of went over the purl stitch at the beginning, but just in case you need a refresher on it, purl stitch, you're going to pull the yarn up through the bottom, creating a new loop. You're going to take that old loop off, put the new loop on. Take the old loop off, put the new loop on. Take the old loop off, put the new loop on, and then these 2, sorry, trying to hold this still, will be U-stitches. These ones will be purls again. And you're going to do this, and then when you come to a peg, no matter what stitch you're on, for this one, I don't purl and take these off for the ones right here. I still do the U-stitch to take them off for that first round. Then after that, I will switch to a purl stitch if it's in the ones that are purled, which I'll show you when I get to that. But what you do is you just follow this stitch pattern. This one will be a U-stitch. You'll pick that up, and then you'll go back here. You'll pick that one up, and you're just going to go back and forth. I'm at my first peg of a purl stitch that I need to increase. So like I said, we're just treating it like normal. We're going to wrap behind it, take both loops over the top, and then we'll go back and work the rest like normal. Now the next time we come to this, it'll be a peg that we will purl. I just wanted to show you that you don't do anything different when you are doing your increase with it. You're still going to U-wrap, take them over. That next time around is when you will change your stitch. If you do the purl stitch right on this edge piece, it's going to kind of change up the texture a bit. So that's the only reason I do that. So at this point, you're just going to go back and forth until you've only got one double stitch left. Got my increases almost done. I just want to show you something. I've got one double still left on this side and one double still left on this side. And I'm at this point where I'd pick this one up and then go back and get this one. But what I'm going to do is, instead of picking this one up and then going back and getting this one, I prefer to work in the round in a clockwise fashion, basically, to where I'm going like this. It's more comfortable for me to do it. So at this point, I've just got one left on each side. I'm actually going to start at this point and just start going in the round. To measure how long you need your body, what I did was I took the foot, put it on a piece of paper, marked the toe, and marked the heel, and measured how long that was. And then take about 1.5 inches off of that, and that tells you how big the body needs to be. Now this first one I made fits perfect, and I know just where the collar changed. It just happened this way, exactly how many rows my body was, because I wasn't measuring it as I went, but it's 68 rows from toe to heel, which I'll talk a little bit more about measuring later. But at this point, we're going to do the body. If you choose to go back, pick this one up, and then start going in around, that is fine too. I've just noticed sometimes you might end up with a little bit of a gap right at the edge, right here at the edge of your toe. And it's, with the toe it doesn't really make a difference, but for the heel it does, because you don't want any big holes in your heel. And the toe, those fill in pretty good anyway, but this is just what I do. For the whole body of the sock, you will be ignoring the orange ones over here. All of these are going to be U stitches. And then you're still going to keep this pattern on the front where the marked pegs are purls, the empty ones are U. Marked purl, empty U. So at this point, I'm taking both over, but you can take them one at a time or you can take both. It doesn't make any difference. And then instead of turning and going back the opposite way, I'm just going to start going in a circle. Now do be careful, because this first row here was your purl row, and some of these, it's going to be very loose. Let me get some of this done and I'll show you what I'm talking about. See how those are pulling up? You can take and pull them back down. But your first couple rows on this side, that's how it's going to be until you get more going here and these strings aren't right up at these pegs. So you're not doing anything wrong if you notice that. Here, I'll zoom in a bit more and just watch what happens. Okay, I've got that around and I'm pulling it up. It's pulling all that around it. And all this is pretty loose, but you kind of want to make it tight. Don't do that. Just wrap it in the U-stitch and make sure you don't accidentally pick any of these up and get them on the other side of the peg, because then that will make, see right here, that'd been easy to pick that up and pull over with it, but we just need this, because if you get those kind of messed up, then it makes it harder to tighten all this up later for the toe. And you want to make sure your tension is loose, or else you'll end up with a tight row there as well. So that's all there is to it. At this point, go in the round until you get the body as long as we get to the heel. Once you have a good bit of the sock worked, then we can tighten up the toe. Now what you're going to do is you're going to start on the opposite end of the cast on string, all the way over at the edge, and all we're going to do is tighten these stitches. You tighten the one, then you go to the next one, you go to the next one. As you can see, it tightens up and it will actually create a seamless toe. Now I do hold the extra strings up just so that they are out of the way and that I'm not accidentally tightening up the wrong string. But right here is that row. It's completely seamless. Go ahead and tighten this up all the way to the other end. Once you get all the way over to the other side, that last stitch, you should just be able to pull. Now if you're using, this is a merino, but if you're using just a regular wool, this may try to felt on you as you are pulling the Kitchener cast on clothes. So you do want to watch out for that. But once it is all pulled, this is how it looks, and you can't really even tell which row it was. Okay, once the body of the sock is as long as you need it to be, what I did was I took my remaining yarn and just stuck down inside. If I was using a spool, see, even that would have fit down in there if the whole thing was still full. After I did that, oh, pulled the string off. Okay, The reason I do that is because this is a self-striping yarn. If I was using a solid collared yarn, I wouldn't put this to the side. I would do the heel with the working yarn. So the only reason I'm switching is because of the collar of the yarn. Okay, so what we're going to do, you're still going to do your same stitches, but we are going to start. See, I stopped. See where the collar changes? I stopped. This one was my last one I did a U-stitch on. So I'm going to U-stitch. I'm going to hold the yarn across the front. Put the tail down on that side. I'm going to hold that. I'm going to hold this. And all I'm doing to start the new yarn. There we go. It started. The first few I'm going to do pretty loose. There we go. You're going to do the U-stitch all the way to this peg over here. It's just this half of the loom. So this is a 60 peg loom, so these 30 pegs. What we're actually going to be doing is repeating the toe pretty much, except for where we started the ribbing, but the decreases and increases. But I did the toe on this side of the loom, so I'm doing the heel on this side of the loom. So go ahead and U-stitch all the way to the last peg right here. Alright, we are at our last peg on this side. Instead of doing the U-stitch on it, I'm going to lift it, put the working yarn behind, put it back on, and U-stitch back to this peg, lift this one. We're going to do our decreases just like we did for the toe. And we're going to do that back and forth until there's the same number that we did for the toe we're going to do for the heel. All this can be adjusted if you prefer. If you have narrow toes and a wide heel, you can do less, more decreases for the toe and less for the heel. That's one thing I like about this pattern, is that you can adjust it to the correct size you need. But go ahead, because this was our first decrease. We're just going to go all the way back to the other side and do a decrease, and we're going to come back and decrease this one. We're going to decrease, what did I do? 8 on both sides. Once you have decreased 8 on each side, show you what it looks like. We'll start doing our increase, exact same as we did for the toe, but we're not going to switch our stitches. We're going to keep it all the U-stitch while we increase the whole thing. So what you're going to do is you're going to U-stitch all the way over to your first peg with 2 stitches on it, pick that one up, and go back to the first one on this side with 2 stitches on it. Go back and forth until all of them are done, and then you'll cut your string. But I'll show you how to do that when you get to it. Okay, once your heel is done, and you've picked up every peg that has 2 stitches on them, you should be back to the side where your cast on was for the heel. Cut the string, just leave that alone for now. You'll weave that in later. You just get started right back where you left off with your U-stitch. You're going to do the U-stitch to peg 1, and then you will go back to your ribbing. You're going to do the ribbing on the front part of the sock like you have been. That's why I've got these marked one color and the back marked a different color, because we're going to do 5 rows of doing the ribbing the exact same as you did for the body of the sock. The reason we do that is if we don't, your ribbing starts down here and it's kind of like on the back of your foot. So doing the 5 rows of just U-stitch before we start the ribbing on the back part of the cuff, it pulls that up to where it's above your heel. And then you're going to do 25 rows for the cuff, and then I'll show you how to cast off. So again, you're going to do 5 rows with, this is the side of the heel, U-stitch, and you do your rib stitch for 5 rows. Then you're going to do 25 rows of your rib stitch all the way around, following your stitch markers. Then I'll show you how to do your cast off. Once you have the cuff as long as you want, then you're going to take your working yarn and wrap it around the loom 3 times to do this cast off. Now as you can see, I did my cuff 25 rows long after those initial 5 rows. But you can make it shorter. If you would do, 10 rows long, you'd probably be able to get 1 pair of socks out of just 1 skein of this yarn. You can see right here is where I had to add new yarn. And all I do when I add new yarn is I take the old yarn and the new yarn, just place them together like this and run them together for 3 to 4 stitches, and then that locks it in. I do have other videos that can show you that if you need a better tutorial on how to add yarn. Okay, we're going to do a super stretchy cast off. Our yarn is coming from this peg, so we're going to skip the pink peg and we're going to pull the yarn up through that second peg, bring it back 1 and go through. Oops. Try that again. Go back 1 and pull it down through. Now it's coming from this peg. We are going to skip a peg and go up, go back 1 peg right here and go down. I'm going to show you again because that's what you do all the way around this loom. You skip a peg, go up through the bottom, you go back 1 peg and pull the yarn down. Do this all the way around and then take everything off the loom. Weave in your ends and you're done. Our socks are done. Here's the one on my foot. Now there was only one thing I wanted to show, because when weaving all your ends in, you just weave them in, cut them off. It's nothing really special. The only spot is if you're using a self-striping yarn and you change out the yarn you use for the heel, sometimes you will end up with a hole right here. What I do is I just take and tie that and just twist it once and tie it, which I've already done that. Let me zoom in. And I kind of tighten that up to close that off. And then I try to follow the collar, the corresponding collar. I just take my hook, and just kind of weave this through for a few stitches, just to get the tail out of the way and kind of lock this in. And then I'll weave that one in. And then for this one, I'm going over a couple stitches. I want that to kind of lock in. And then I'm just going to follow the green. That way you won't notice it at all. If I can pick it up. There we go. If the whole thing is the same collar and you're weaving ends in, I suggest taking and you can look at the stitches and kind of look, and you can see which way the yarn is running, because typically it's kind of like it'll run like this and then up and then down, and you follow that and they weave in a lot better. But that's it, and your sock is done. And there was one other thing I wanted to show you. I mentioned it in the beginning of the video. There's a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of discussion lately about the wrap and turn on the heel. Whether it is better to wrap over or lift the stitch and wrap. Now I did it for the toe. One side I did one way, the other side I did the other way, but it's really hard to tell because of the ribbing and everything. So here on the heel, now remember I'm using the U-stitch. This will turn out different if you are using different stitches. I have found if I just do the wrap and turn with an E-wrap stitch that I get holes, because this is the wrap and turn side. And let me open it up so That is the wrap and turn side. I'm stretching this out probably a little more than it would stretch on your foot. So I'm seeing a few little holes there. This is when you pick up the stitch, put the yarn under, and wrap and turn. See, I'm not seeing, it's a lot more, to me it seems a little more uniform. Right here, which side? Oh, this other side was the side where the new collar was started. But I'm not sure why people get various results with this. But see, to me it looks like the wrap above with the U-stitch is creating a little more holes. It's not quite as uniform as the other one, but without it being stretched out, they both look nice. Like, they look really similar. Like, these socks, the person who gets these is not going to be able to tell just by looking, unless they watch the video, of course. Let me pull it back. There's the one side. Here's the other. It's a slight difference, but it's really not a big difference. And of course, the way I did my cuff, you zoom, oh, wrong way. I did just a little cuff, but it's a long enough cuff that you can fold it down if you would like. And if you want to make these socks with just one skein of yarn, and you've got a foot, about an average woman's size foot like me, one skein will be enough to make it if you make a short cuff on it. So instead of doing 25 rows, if you just did like 10 to 15 after your initial 5, of course. But if you just did like 10 to 15, there would be enough. And I'll show you why. Because I started my new skein in right here. So from here to here, that's what you'd have to cut out, which these collars are about 4 rows each. So that's about 12, well, there's a couple here, about 15 rows if I cut off the whole pattern. It would have been, I would have been able to do it with just one, because you can see this hasn't been used much in it. Alright guys, that's all I've got for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video was helpful. There is a direct link to the PDF in the description. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me. My email is in the description below, or you can leave comments in the description. Thank you for watching.